So just to give you a brief overview of what we're going to be working on together today, we're going to be kicking off this workshop by reviewing the work that you did in this in-between month. So in between the first workshop and the second workshop for March. If you're a new program and you don't have any data and you're not working on a CQI project at this time, that's fine. This is just going to be an opportunity now for you to engage with other programs that are doing these to see how they have worked on their projects and to get you to start thinking about how you might engage with the CQI process when that comes up for you. We're then going to be going into what are PDSA cycles, what those entail, how you would conduct one. We'll give you a broad example of how that process could look. Then Ava is going to give a review of the MIS CQI module that she worked on with Corinne to provide a demonstration for that. Then Pekini is going to have a brief discussion surrounding the service plans and resources available to you for that. And then we'll wrap the workshop up with what you'll be working on in the off month of May for June. And just to show you where we're already at in this timeline, I don't know about you, it's gone by in a crazy flash. We're already in April of this year. And you've already done a lot here, right? When you think about it, we've introduced this initiative to you. You've already gotten the first two processes of the CQI steps complete. You've done a lot of work in the in-between month of March. And now we're here in the third process looking at PDSA cycles. You'll have some work done in May. Then we're going to reconvene in June again to get the last step of the CQI process available to you. You'll do a little bit more work in July in between then, and then we're going to have two more workshops in August and October. And these workshops are going to be a little bit different, as you kind of keep in mind, than these first three. They're not going to be content-based. Instead, for August, we're going to offer you an office hours workshop. This will be for you to come and for us to provide any sort of technical assistance that we can for any issues that you might be having in implementing your CQI projects. It's also going to be an opportunity for you to work together as programs to maybe help workshop each other's ideas together. And then in October, we still would provide you technical assistance if you need it. We would be happy to do that. But we're thinking that we might also hold a mini CQI conference. You and your team could come together with a couple slides if you wanted. You could present on what you did for your CQI projects, what were the results, what sort of things did you learn from this whole process and what you're thinking of doing there. Really, the whole intention and idea would be, we want to let you have a victory lap, so to speak, on what you've done and have a very nice sense of accomplishment of having done so much work over this time. So just something to kind of keep in the back of your heads as we kind of go forward for the rest of the year. So enough about the organizational side of things. Let's get into the first major portion of the workshop, which is really going to see what you did in this off-month work period. And we're going to be doing this by putting you in breakout rooms. And you're going to be sharing your answers with each other based on these questions. We're really going to share feedback and ideas with each other. We want to foster as much of a learning environment as we can here. So what I want you to do is, as you're answering these and talking over these answers with each other, please keep those answers and conversations in mind, because we're going to come back as a larger group to really debrief and see what sort of differences and similarities you found with each other, with other programs. What did you learn from this process that you might not have thought about as you're hearing from your peers here? So for recording purposes, we will be pausing recording while you're in your breakout rooms. So you should be all set there. Additionally, just as a heads up, Ava and I are actually going to be bouncing around to each of your rooms to help answer any questions that you might have up until this point. So to be as efficient as possible, because we want to make sure we reach every single room, please have the questions that you have for Ava and I in mind at the top of your lists. That way we can answer those, and that way we're able to make sure that everyone can have their questions answered, because we have to bounce around. And if we have additional time, we can still talk to you. Because of this too, breakout sessions are actually going to be longer than we've had last time. We're going to be giving you 25 minutes with your peers this time for you to have in a group, and then have our debrief afterwards. So really what we want you to do is reflect on processes. So this first set of questions is really going to revolve around your CQI team. We want you to reflect on the process of how you formed your CQI team. Who participated in that process as you were forming them? What roles did people fill? How did you create safety for your team members? And did you establish any group rules? And if so, what were they? How did you include inclusion and equity while you were developing your SMARTY goals and your AIM statement? And finally, really just this idea of share what was helpful for your program and your group, and know what you might not have thought about these processes till you heard them from your peers. The whole point of this is that, and you'll learn as we get further into this CQI process, this is an iterative thing. A lot of the work that you've done now is going to build on what we're going to work on today. So we really want to just have you kind of reflect on that. So you keep it in mind as we go forward with this learning process. So with that, we're going to be putting you in your rooms. I'm really excited to hear and listen to your conversations and helping you with any sort of questions that I can offer. And yeah, Emily's going to be putting you in rooms and
Yeah, I got.
all right. So I think we got everyone back. So other than not having enough time, I'm sure, I wish we could have more time and we could give you more time for these conversations. Um, what did y'all have conversations about the process and about picking your topic and along those lines? Who'd like to share?
I would. One of the things, because I thought I alone was struggling with, is the inclusion of families in the service plan CQI, so I struggled with how do you include them? So my creative way, and I asked my group members about it too, because in the the CQI Rust, I can't remember which document, I wrote that how we would include the families is that, once we would make sure that we should, but be very mindful of what they inform us of in the frog and what they inform us of informally, in making sure that the service plan really takes into account, their needs and their goals and all of that. But other than that, like, I struggled with how else could you include a family in the CQI process. And some of the other group also had that same struggle.
Yeah, Damali, just to kind of talk about that for a quick moment. That's great. We recognize service plans are a little bit harder to integrate families and their perspectives into this. So I'm really impressed that you did that. We're able to find a way to incorporate them and their feedback in that. Thank you for sharing that. Who else would like to share? Did anyone else find anything that they accounted for with their group for this?
One thing that we did talk about was getting our team's buy-in. And the thought of what I really did like getting clarification on from Ava was that we don't have to do it on the service plan. It's something that we're already working on. Like, I'm currently working on capacity and already doing that with our PIP from OCFS. So, like, instead of adding more work, we're already doing that work. Somebody else had said, we're already doing it. You know what I mean? So it's not like we're adding something else. We're just kind of like, laying it out better and clarifying what everybody's role is in it. So that definitely, I feel better about that. And then also I did have a question. So if we were going to be addressing capacity, like thinking about getting families involved, like, I know Damalia just said that we could, like, thinking about utilizing feedback from the frog, but like we could use like participant satisfaction surveys, exit surveys, or does it have to be like a live group?
I mean, you could do whatever you want. If you want to do surveys and you think that's a way that you're going to get, enough of their input into it, you absolutely are more than welcome to do that. I think the end goal, though, is for something along that line. You might also want to consider having a family member on your CQI team at that point. They are going to offer a lot of insight, especially when we get into the PDSA cycle and focusing on that and understanding that. They're going to offer some invaluable insight that you might not necessarily recognize on the program side of it, but they're going to bring it on the family side. So I would definitely say that's the way that you're going to get them engaged. And that's a really relevant topic to have families constantly being talking about this issue and their perspective on it.
I have a question to both Walter and Olivia. So the suggestion that Olivia just had about having parents involved using a survey, is that directly linked to capacity only? Because I see where that will help with capacity building, understanding their perspective. So I'm thinking that's what you were talking about as this relates specifically to capacity building.
My survey doesn't necessarily, is not for capacity building, but it's used for like quality assurance.
Right.
That, we're meeting families where they're at, that they feel like they're being respected, they're being heard. So that way they're more apt to stay, like family retention. And then we also have exit surveys that we've started doing on the Survey Monkey platform. So that way, if families were not able to engage them or we're not able to even contact them, we send out a text message with the link, and it just asks like the reasons, you know, why, or if you would like a call back, that maybe we have the wrong number or they just haven't been able to call us back. And then for participants who are exiting the survey, the reasons why, what we could have done better, what they really enjoyed about the program. So that way we are meeting the families where they're at and making ourselves more accessible to them. So I think that it would be relevant, but I can also see Walter's point in having, you know, like real life and live feedback with what we're talking about. I can definitely see the quality in that.
So can I ask a follow-up question? Do you have, can you send to, I don't know about anybody else, but can you send to me the exit survey for the families? Because I think that's great feedback that we can utilize in terms of looking at retention of family and how we can move forward with that. So if you don't mind sending out the exit survey for relating to families.
Walter, can I send that to you and you can send it out?
I would love to send that out as a resource. Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nora, so you're raising your hand?
Hi, yes. I was just wondering, and this just came to my mind, if this would suffice as like family voice to have maybe like a graduating participant or someone who's participating on your advisory board committee be sort of that person who helps provide like family feedback as like a family representative or a
100%.
community representative. And then that way, I mean, those are the stakeholders too that we share our CQIs with and things like that. So
Yeah, so 100%, yes.
Okay, cool.
And just to add on to that, I've gotten that question before of, well, do you think it's more beneficial to have a person who's graduated or at the very end of the program versus the middle versus the beginning? And I said, why not have all three of those kinds of people in your as a family voice on your CQI team, right? Because you're getting different important perspectives. The people at the beginning, why did you decide to come in the first place? The people in the middle, like what's keeping you there? The people at the end, what made you stay till the very end of this whole time staying in the program? They're all going to offer a unique insight to you that's going to be valuable as you're working on that topic.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Any other things that anyone want to kind of last minute talk about with their group conversations? All right. I hope you all got a lot out of it when I was bouncing around the rooms. There seemed to be really great engaged conversations. So I'm really excited about that. Thank you all for participating in that whole point. So we'll get right back into the content portion of this. So as we know, just to kind of briefly review this concept, CQI process is pretty simply broken down into 4 major steps, right? We got forming a CQI team, identifying an improvement area. We're here now at the plan, do, study, act cycle if we're in this, roadmap, and then we get this final component of lessons learned. So just to let you know, and where you think about this and have this idea in mind, you have already learned half of how to conduct a CQI project. You're 50% of the way there. And after today, you've learned 3/4 of it. You're 75% complete. You all should feel really accomplished about where you're at already just now in this whole process here. You're going to be done with learning how to conduct a CQI project after June. So you should all just really feel accomplished on how far we've already just come here. So let's get into it. What is a PDSA cycle? PDSA, or Plan, Do, Study, Act, is just a series of activities that you're doing as a CQI team to achieve your aim statement from the change plan that you develop. So what you're doing to overcome the issue you've identified. And it's really advantageous for multiple reasons when you do a PDSA cycle. It uses the scientific approach in order to really identify a method of achievement. You select an issue that you have, you hypothesize a methodology for that, you implement it, and you test and evaluate whether that change strategy worked. And then you get to go back to the drawing board and make tweaks to really make it so that eventually you don't have that issue anymore. Because of this, and because it's very just incremental steps, you know exactly what is supposed to happen and when it's supposed to happen there. as a result for you. There's no ambiguity on your end on when things are supposed to be occurring here. And as a result of that, it's really helping you quickly identify solutions to the issue and your topic that you found. So because of this, we really want to keep in our mind that we want to start small when you're doing a CQI presentation or when you're doing your PDSA cycle. Really, this idea is that we want you to start small and thoughtfully to really cause this transformation in practice that's ultimately helping you provide services to families. So, and this is because small tests and small changes, they're going to be less risky. They're going to use a lot less resources for you, but it's still going to allow you as a team to decide whether that had an impact or not towards the practices of your programs. Now, really, we understand that this isn't going to be able to case in all times, but we really suggest if you can, when you're developing your PDSA cycles, to do a power of one test. And this is really where you select one family, one home visit, 1 hour, one worker. If you do that and you find that your strategy didn't work, guess what? It's not going to be that big of a deal to have to go back to square one at that point as a result of it. So if you can, and when it is relevant, try to do that power of one test there with this. And the final component here that's really nice is because we're using the scientific approach with the PDSA cycle, it's allowing for a lot of a documentation. We want you to really be detailed in all the things that you write down and what you've done and when you've done them. And why is that the case? Because it allows for replication. You can take all that information that you document and you can share it with each other at other programs. So therefore they can take what you've done and try and apply it to themselves and overcome that same issue. But guess what? It's also beneficial for you yourself as your own program. You can take all that work and that documentation that you've done, and you can actually apply it to similar issues at your own program. And therefore now you have a developed scaffolding that you can now apply and have a foundational base that you can apply to other future CQI projects. And you're going to know what works and how it worked for you before you even begin the next one. You're not starting at square one as a result of that, if you have really detailed documentation for these things. So how do we actually kick off a CQI cycle? You begin with what's called a root cause analysis. Really what a root cause analysis is that you are working together to identify all the underlying issue or issues that might be causing your topic, essentially, and the pathway that it's leading to within your program. And this is important because when you as a CQI team understand what is exactly causing an issue, you're more likely to develop a change plan that's going to be successful at alleviating it. If you don't, what's going to happen is that you might temporarily alleviate the issue that you've selected, but it's going to come back because the actual thing that's causing it hasn't actually been addressed. Really, the best analogy is that if you don't identify a root cause, you're treating a symptom, you're not treating the disease. You need to really dig deep, pull out the roots so that tree doesn't grow back as a result of it. So there's some things that we want you to keep in mind, some core principles that come when you do a root cause analysis here. First and foremost, all team members need to have the same goal in mind. This is really the idea that you've all worked together through your aim statement. Keep that in mind and in the back of your heads as you're working towards trying to identify your root cause or your causes, because what is your ultimate goal and how is identifying that issue going to help you reach that ultimate goal that you've selected as a team? In line with this too is we want to focus on processes and not individuals. This is to help you keep in mind that the issue is persistent in your system. We are not going to blame others for that issue that you have identified. So for example, of service plans, if it's that service plans are not being entered because it might be the oversight of somebody in the program, you as a CQI team should be asking yourselves, was this a part of their onboarding training? Do they have enough knowledge about the MIS? Is there some sort of system we could develop for them to remind this individual to enter that information? Pointing fingers will not address your issue. And if you point fingers and try and fix it as an individual problem, guess what? That issue still might come back, even if that person has left your program. So you want to think about systemic changes for this. You want to use open and honest communication with each other and really lean on learned experiences and learned expertise here. And this goes in line too, first with creating safety within your team, right? Everyone should feel comfortable with sharing their perspectives on this topic, because that's going to be potentially the reason that you're able to identify the root cause. If you're not sharing necessarily something that's super duper flattering about how something's working at the time, people need to be able to be comfortable sharing that their experiences and what they think might be the issue as a result of that and what's causing that issue. You want to base all your decisions on data and facts as well. Keep that conversation surrounded by what you're seeing in the data here. And this is really more of the idea of meaning to keep your team on track from biasing ideas with that. If you don't see it necessarily in the data and how it's operating in the system, be hesitant to maybe talk about it in that regard. So really keep it on data and facts about what's going on for the issue. Keep a family focus. Keep it in the family focus and the idea that you really want to improve service delivery for families. That's why we're doing CQI at the end of the day in a lot of ways. And also, if you have, when it's relevant for the topic and you have family members on your CQI team, make sure that you're really listening to them and make sure that you're really understanding their perspective as they are offering their ideas on this topic. And finally, and this one's a little bit aligned with the second principle here, think about how changes to the system will make your program work more efficiently. What is it about how things are operating that is potentially causing the issue that you have identified as a team? That's really going to help you keep that all in mind as you keep going forward there. It's also important to keep in mind that if you did these first two steps, this is that iterative process of the CQI process, these core principles are going to come pretty easily for you, right? If you have developed the team that you built that's diverse, they're going to offer their diverse perspectives. They have a sense of safety and ground rules within the team. It's going to be really easy to achieve a lot of these principles there. It's really going to be easy to have everyone having the same goals in mind, feel safe, and keep that family focus and systems thinking as you go forward there. So we have these core principles that go with root cause analysis, and there are big, broad steps that you're actually going to be doing in order to conduct this. First and foremost, and you'll see that these are a lot of parallels to the principles that I just mentioned, you're going to reiterate your topic. So this is really the idea of before you begin anything, you all as a team should maybe before the meeting even begins, restate your aim statement. What's the goal that we're really looking forward here? What's the issue that we're trying to address? That puts you in that mindset. You're then going to gather or regather your data. So before you actually move on to identifying the underlying problem here, recollect and evaluate all aspects of the situation. So look at proof that you have that issue in your program and your data in the MIS. Look to see maybe how long it's been occurring, because that might help you figure it out. And if you have time, maybe look to see if there are additional consequences that are occurring in your program and the data because of this issue. What additional issues might your program be experiencing because this is here as a result of it? You then move on to the third broad step, which is identifying causal factors. These are the big broad categories of how your program operates for which specific root causes could be categorized under, and really is also getting at where in the process this might be occurring. What's going on between after the frog and being entered in the MIS that this might be happening? Is there something about the MIS system broadly about data entry that could this be occurring? Is there something going on between maybe home visitors talking with their supervisors about why it potentially isn't getting updated in the MIS? So think about these processes and these big broad categories about where you might be able to categorize root causes. From there, you actually get to finally, identify and determine what your root cause is by using root cause analysis tools, which we'll just get into in a moment. And after all that's done, you get to develop your change strategy. This is now where you really get to dive into developing a change strategy to ensure that this problem doesn't happen again. So how do we do? So now you got these principles, we got these big broad steps. Let's get into how, or what are the tools that you can use to do a root cause analysis. We're going to discuss just 3 methodologies today. These are called 5 whys, fishbone diagram, and brainstorming. There are other methodologies. There's ones called like appreciation and drill down. We're going to focus on these 3 because they're typically the most common that you will find when you look at root cause analysis tools. So 5 whys. 5 whys is an activity where you really start asking why questions pertaining to your issue, with the idea that you as a CQI team eventually are iteratively working backwards till eventually you're going to identify the root cause. So you would, as a CQI team, come together. You'd probably start off with, why is this issue happening? The whole team then provides their answers. The scribe will write them all down. You then think about your next why question. You ask that why question. The team gives their set of answers. You develop your next why, ask it, more answers, with the idea being that eventually you're going to have an answer that you can no longer ask why to. And if you can no longer ask why, according to this method, you've then identified your root cause, and you can go forward to developing your change strategy about that. If you're more of a visual person, I would suggest doing a fishbone diagram, also known as a cause and effect diagram. So this is really just a visual representation, kind of a map on what's potentially causing your issue here. And really a fishbone diagram is broken down into 4 parts. You have this first part here, which is the head. This is where you're going to put your main issue, your main topic. You have your spine, which is this line in the middle. That's going to connect everything together. You have ribs, which are these big broad categories. These are your causal factors. These are the big categories that you can organize your root causes under. And then you have lines, which are under each of these ribs. These are going to be your specific root causes on what could potentially be causing your issue. And what's nice about fishbone and cause and effect diagrams is once you have all of these root causes down and all these categories down, you are able then to maybe develop a map on where these might be intersecting and really help you visually see how that process is leading to the issue that you're seeing, so you can develop your change strategy where and when you might want to see it as a result of it. The final strategy is brainstorming. Brainstorming is a bit more of an abstract tool than the 5 whys or the fishbone diagram. It's a group approach. It's where you all come together and you talk and generate thoughts about what might be the root cause of the issue. And you also are at this time also developing strategies to overcome that root cause. You could use it as a method if you've done the other more concrete versions. You could do it after a 5 whys or a fishbone diagram, but you could also just do it from the beginning here. The key thing here to understand is when you do a root cause or a brainstorming analysis, you do need to analyze your ideas afterwards. You need to take all the information that you got from a brainstorming session, categorize those ideas, and really think through and analyze the why is this an issue still, and how can we achieve our goal based on what we've analyzed here. So there are a couple rules to keep in mind as you do a brainstorming session. First and foremost, there's a no judgment zone when you do a brainstorming session. You're not allowed to judge others' ideas. No ideas are going to be more or less important than others. There is no use of positions or titles when you're doing this process, and you need to take turns sharing ideas. So if you've really developed a team safety standards and ground rules beforehand, you're going to make a no judgment zone here. We want you to also think about as outside the box thinking as possible here. When it's relevant, really think about all angles of the issue that might be causing it. And this is going to really be helpful when you have a diverse set of teams to really be able to think of outside the box perspectives on this. For the first brainstorming session, we really want you to generate as many ideas as possible around this issue. We kind of want you to go for quantity at this point. And then the more details and quality can come afterwards, because if you list everything, you can further expand and get more detailed when you find the ideas that might be more pertinent for this. And in tandem with this idea is we want to build on each other. We want you to encourage teammates to expand on the presented ideas and suggestions. Essentially, stand on the shoulders of giants with each other and create safety with everyone here, that they're able to take an idea that's been presented and you're able to say, I like that. However, I think we maybe need to tweak it this way in order for it to work for our program. We also want you to record all your ideas there, and that's going to be beneficial so that you can take that information and really, keep records in case you have to come back and you need additional information on something, so you know where something happened. And finally, think about smaller is better when you're thinking about your strategies on how to overcome this issue. Really, we've already kind of talked about this concept, but think about how the smallest change that you can make will have the biggest impact as you're thinking of solutions to this idea. If you need to, you are more than welcome to expand outward and expand on your solution here, but really try and think of the smallest solutions for the biggest impact here for you, just to make life easier for you as a program as well. Once all that's been done, big deep breath, This is one of those unfortunate steps, I think, where you have to go back before you get to go forward. Because once you've identified your root cause, you need to actually still make sure that you're aligned with your SMARTY goals in your aim statement here. Make sure that your topic, your solution, the root cause itself still aligns with the SMARTY criteria. If it still aligns with all that, you get to move on to the next portion of the PDSA cycle, which is really developing your change strategy here. You've identified your area of improvement. You know what the root cause is, or at least you believe you know what the root cause is. What are the solutions for that? You've revisited those SMARTY goals. Now you develop that aim statement, which is basically what's the change that you're trying to implement to overcome your issue. So for service plans, if they're not being entered because maybe they're not being discussed or entered right away into the MIS, your change strategy could just be simply, we're setting aside a block of time for supervisors to work on MIS data entry. And you could even say, for 1 week, there will be 2 hours of time blocked off for supervisors to enter data. That's it. That's a change strategy. Now you just have to think around how you have to think about some things with that. How are you need to then develop a timeline for implementation. So for that example, you're doing it for 1 week. What data needs to be collected to actually evaluate whether your change strategy works, and how are we going to analyze it, and what are we going to do with our analysis afterwards? So you have to keep in mind, when you're doing this evaluation of your change strategy, you do need to collect 3 types of measures here. These are called process measures, outcome measures, and balancing measures. So process measures are used to really understand how your change strategy was implemented. Did it get put into practice the way you wanted it to? So for the example I just gave you, you want to make sure that supervisors actually use those 2 hours for data entry. If they didn't, you didn't pass the process measure. So that's just how that's how that one works. Outcome measures are the easiest one, I would say. These are used to just determine whether your change plan worked or not, really. It was successful. So this would be, if you looked in the MIS, your percent of PC1s that have a service plan. If it increased, it passed the outcome measure idea. And balancing measures are really just used to analyze if you had any unintended negative consequences with your change strategy. So for example, it might be that supervisors, because they have 2 hours that are now blocked off, they're not able to get to other tasks because they have to use that time to work on their data entry. You could argue that that is an unintended negative consequence, and it's up to you as a CQI team to think about how you might be able to overcome that unintended negative consequence as a result of it. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them during this whole part. From there, in the plan phase, we get to move on to do. So do is pretty simple. It's where you actually now are implementing your change strategy to test it. You're putting it into practice for the first time. And really at this point, you're also going to be collecting your data, depending on the time frame, at regular intervals through this. I want to heavily stress this, and it's heavily encouraged, that even during your do phase, you should be looking at your data. And you should be looking to see whether your change strategy is working or not, even during the do phase, because guess what? You are totally allowed to make changes to your change strategy during this phase in real time, because that could be the key difference between shifting it from an unsuccessful change strategy to a successful one based on the data that you are collecting. So you are allowed to collect data at regular intervals, see if it's working or not, and make adjustments in real time as a result of that. Once all that's done and your time comes to a close for your implementation of it, you're going to study what the results were of it. You're going to really look at those 3 measures and see, did your change strategy essentially work or not? Once you have that all set, you move pretty quickly on to the final step of a PDSA cycle. You're going to act. Based on what you found in your study step, you as a CQI team need to decide what to do with your change strategy. And you have 3 really options available to you. And these are called adopt, adapt, and abandon. It's 3 A's. So your first option is adopting it. This is the scenario where your change strategy worked. It produced the results that you wanted. It was actually implemented as it was designed. There were no unintended negative consequences. You get to adopt it. But you have to go from a different decisions from there if you choose adopt. The first situation is your change strategy worked. You as a CQI team actually feel there's no more information that you need. You think it's going to work on a larger scale within your program. You get to implement it program wide. It becomes a new practice at your program. And at that point, you're done. At most, what you need to potentially do is just monitor it to make sure that it's still working as it should be in the future. But that's it. You get to implement it program wide. The second option is more of what we call a scale up test or a scaling process. This is a scenario where you as a CQI team feel you might need additional information on the situation. You want to see if it's going to work on a larger scale. So what you would do is a scale up test here. And this is really where the idea of is you're making purposeful and iterative increases in your size of your tests here. So really it just is increasing it increment by increment. So you might do a change strategy in your power of one test. It seemed to work, but we need some more information. We want to see if it works with more supervisors. So you might increase it to 3. You have 3 supervisors now with 3 families idea. The key here is that your tests of these are going to be scaled up or down based on the results of that test. So at your power, if you do like your 3 test and it didn't seem to work, you might need to go back to 1, make adjustments to the tweaks to your change strategy and test it again at 3. If it worked, maybe you get to go up to 5 until eventually the idea is that you've just adopted it program wide. You finally have collected enough information for it to work. The second broader option here is adapting it. This is if your change strategy didn't produce the results that you wanted, or it wasn't implemented as it should have been, or it produced some sort of negative consequence, but you have an option to really make a bigger change to your change strategy. You can adapt it and you're going to retest it in another PDSA cycle. Abandon is a very similar situation as adapt. This is where your change strategy didn't produce the results you wanted. It wasn't implemented as it should have been or could have been. It produced a negative consequence. The key difference here is there is no way for you to make an adjustment to the change strategy to overcome that issue. There's just no way. At that point, you need to abandon it. Do want to mention this one should be used with a little bit of caution because there's a lot of work that comes into this point, even with a power of one test, if you think about it. Because if you abandon, the idea is that you actually have to go back, do a whole other new root cause analysis and a whole other PDSA cycle. You're developing a new change plan and you have to implement it and test it all over again. So this one's a little bit more of a cautious one to be used. So that's really it. Once you've done that, you've completed a PDSA cycle and the PDSA step in the CQI process. So just to kind of give you a quick broad example of what this could look like, we'll go over that. This isn't meant to be incredibly detailed. It's not even going to follow all of the things that we've discussed today. It's just more of a way for us to reflect on this process. So first, we're going to assume a program formed a CQI team. They chose service plans as their topic, and they find that 30% of their PC1s have a service plan. So they look through the Smarty approach, seems to be fitting there. They're at 30%. They want to double this, so they're going to go for 60% of their PC1s to have a service plan. We know it's measurable. We know this is obtainable. They're not going to go for a perfect score to begin with. They might need to make some adjustments down the road. It's timely. They're going to say, you know what, we want to give ourselves some ample time here. So we're going to say by September 30th, 2023, we're going to try and have 60% of PC1s with a service plan. They're going to actually be inclusive. They're going to include all input from all service staff for themselves here. And it's going to be equitable. It's going to apply to all service staff that work with service plans. Everything looks good. So their aim statement is by September 30th, 2023, 60% of PC1s will have a service plan. So to begin their PDSA cycle, they decide to kick it off with having a focus group with all staff members in the program. They gather that information to kind of see what's going to increase these sort of completion rates. They gather that information, they hold a brainstorming session with themselves. So they engage with this feedback from the focus group. And this CQI team found that supervisors do discuss the risk factors associated with the service plan. They just don't enter that information. Specifically, they don't have enough time They want to add more details outside of their meetings, and they want to potentially, and other work tends to be pulling them away from this, entering this information. So they feel they found the root cause and they develop this change strategy. They're going to develop a weekly reminder for supervisors to take 2 hours to enter information into the MIS, and they're going to hold one CHSR MIS CQI review session, just to review with staff so they all have that information. And they're going to implement this in June to give themselves about 4 months to work towards this goal. They developed it, and now we get into the do phase. And this is already where you can see a success story kind of play out based on this slide. They established that 30% of PC1s have a service plan. They integrate their change plan here. They have their CHSR session and they have their weekly reminder. And they've met their goal between June and July at 60%. Now, because they already were successful at meeting their initial goal, they decide they have an opportunity to create more success here. So they actually revamp their change strategy more. They adjust their change strategy so that they have 2 reminders, one at the beginning and one in the middle of the week, to really make sure that supervisors are cutting around that time there. And they decide to have another implementation of retroactive entering of the existing PC1s to add service plans for them. And you see between July and August, they reach 100%. They're at 100% PC1s with service plans here. And that's really just this idea to show you. So they decide to adopt this change strategy for their program. They found no unintended consequences occurred for the supervisors, and they inadvertently started making it a practice anyways, a part of their weekly routine. So that's how this process can really play out. I recognize that as a nice la-la land potentially, and this is a perfect nothing goes wrong example. Could look like this too. Could be between June and July, you implement your change strategy and you increase to 42%. And then all of a sudden, we might have that supervisor leave in the middle of your change strategy being implemented. And now all of a sudden, we're back down to 31%. You decide to give it to a different supervisor and they're at 31% of their base. So you implement the change strategy with that new supervisor, and you find that between August and September now, we're at 55%. What I want to mention here is this is still arguably a success story. You still have gone for improvement, and you know that there's probably a chance that you can either adopt this because there is proof that it's still working. You might need to do some tweaks in a scale-up test, or you might be able to do some adapting if you want to here, but you still have reached some improvement towards what you're working towards here. So in other words, really don't throw it all out because there had to be some sort of hiccup while you're implementing your change strategies. There's still opportunity here for this to have worked. So that's just something for you to kind of think about and keep in mind as you're going to go forth implementing these change strategies. But with that example in mind, we're going to get into a practical tool aspect of this workshop where I'm going to actually turn it over to Ava, where she is going to review the MIS CQI module for you all.
Yes, I am going to walk us through an example of a CQI plan to show you how the MIS CQI module works. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we're going to do a live demo of this. So let me see. Okay, can everyone see my screen? Okay, great. So we're going to be using a test site for this example. So this will look a little bit different than what you see. And I'm going to go ahead and log in. So when you log in, you're going to go to settings, and you do need supervisor privileges in order to access the CQI plan module. We're going to go to settings, data entry, then we're going to click on CQI plans. And as you can see, we do have a number of CQI plans already in here. So you can go in and edit an existing plan, but for our purposes, we're going to upload a new CQI plan. And for our example, we are going to use service plans as our CQI project, and we are going to be Pine Valley Healthy Families today, which for our purposes is a well-established program in the New York State multi-site system. So Pine Valley Healthy Families, we've decided that we want to get to 100% for service plans entered within 2 weeks of the frog. And so for our plan name, we're going to call the plan, sorry, let me take a step back. I apologize. So the CQI module in the MIS walks you through the Plan, Do, Study, Act cycle, which Walter just talked us through. And so on the top, we have our basic information, the plan. This is the planning phase, and it is recommended that you have your CQI plan mapped out before you enter it into the MIS. So we have the plan phase, and we're going to enter this top information. And then once we enter that, we are going to get into the do, study, and act phases. And you'll see that once we enter this piece. So for our plan name, we're going to be Pine Valley Service Plan Initiation. And let's say we got started right after the February CQI workshop. So let's say we got started February 15th of this year. And so for anticipated achievement date, we met as a CQI team and we looked at our data and we decided that a reasonable achievement date would be September 30th of this year. So we're going to select September 30th. Oh, I'm sorry, I selected June, August, and September. Oh, and that's a Saturday. So let's go with October 2nd. And the anticipated achievement date will really depend on your individual CQI project. For plan status, we're going to select active. And for plan area, so under plan area, there are a number of different areas that you can select for your individual plan, and you can select multiple. So we know that this is a best practice standard requirement. It's also related to the annual service review. And we're also going to select performance indicators because there is a new PI related to this as well. For our data check-in, again, this will vary based on your individual project, but for our program, we have a monthly team meeting. And so we would like to run the data and discuss it monthly as a team. So we're going to select monthly. And for baseline data, so we have a number of fields now here where we enter baseline data, who will monitor it, our aim statement. And there are questions already in the boxes that kind of prompt you to think about what kind of information we're going to be entering in each of these fields. Once you start typing, the text will go away, but if you hover over the question mark, the questions are there as well. So you can refer back to them if you start typing and you want to review the questions again. So for our baseline data, so let's say we ran the service plan analysis report and we found that we're at 68% of service plans completed within 2 weeks of the FROG. And we conducted some root cause analysis as a team. We did the 5 whys, we held a brainstorming session, and we found that service plans are being completed, but just not entered into the MIS. So for our baseline data, we're going to enter that information into the field. And I did copy and paste some of this ahead of time so that you don't have to see me typing. So that's what we have for our baseline. So for our aim, this is our aim statement. By X date, we want X, Y, and Z to be achieved. We kind of already have that mapped out. We know that we need to be at 100%, and we feel that we will be able to achieve this by 10/2 of this year. So for our aim statement, we are going to say by September, change that to October 2nd, 2023, we will be at 100% for service plans entered within 2 weeks of the FROG. For monitoring, this has to do with who's going to be monitoring the data and who will implement the change. So for us, we decided that we are going to have supervisors enter the service plans, and we have selected one supervisor, Walter, who we have asked to run the service plan analysis report on the 1st of the month and then disseminate it, and we'll have our team meeting, which usually occurs mid-month. So for monitoring, And this is an area where you can pull your project sponsor in, and your project sponsor is the person on your team with the most authority, so they can assist with the data monitoring. And then for resources, we do have a number of resources available to us. So we have the CQI workshop materials. We have CA support. So at any point, please feel free to reach out to Walter or myself with questions. If you want us to review materials, we'd be happy to help. We have MIS reports, and another resource that I wanted to plug is a CQI guidance document. And we are going to link that on in the PowerPoint, but it is on the Healthy Families website as well. And the CQI guidance document, it's a document that accompanies this module, and it walks you through the Plan, Do, Study, Act cycle. And it also provides an example like the one that we're doing. It's a different topic, but it walks you through an example of how this would, how a CQI project would look in the MIS. Then we have this comments field, and this isn't something that we need to necessarily enter right away. This is a space for you to jot down notes over the course of your Plan, Do, Study, Act cycle, any challenges you're encountering, how certain strategies are going. And so this is a field that you would use for comments notes as you go through. So we've entered all of our planning information into the module, and now we're going to click submit. Sorry. All right, so it's successfully saved. And then as you see, once we scroll down, we get into the do and then the study act phases of the cycle. So under the do field, this is where we'll enter the different strategies that Pine Valley is going to use to achieve our goal. And then under study act, this is where we'll check in on the individual strategies to see how they're going. So for do, we know that we're going to be running the service plan analysis report on the 1st of the month. And we also know that we're going to be discussing it at our team meeting, which occurs mid-month. So let's map that out. So when you select new strategy, add strategy pops up, and for the strategy number, it's just numeric. So you'll enter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for however many strategies you end up with. For the description, we're going to say run the service plan analysis report monthly. This is the data piece. For status, we're going to select active. For start date, we're going to put, so we ran our baseline data in February, and we're really going to start this on March 1st, ahead of our next team meeting, which is going to be on the 15th. So March 1st is our start date. For check-in frequency, we know we're going to be doing this monthly. For anticipated achievement date, for this strategy, we really have achieved it once we start running the report. So I'm going to put that as March 1st as well. And then you have another field where you can select who will benefit. And for us, we're going to put staff and families as well, because families will ultimately benefit as well. We're going to save that. And then we're going to add our other strategy, which is the discussion piece, where we'll discuss the data at our team meeting. So for add strategy, it's going to be our second strategy. And for the description, we will put discuss service plan analysis CQI at team meeting. For status, it's going to be active. And for start date, our team meeting is going to be on March 15th. So we're going to say March 15th. For check-in frequency, it will also be monthly. For our achievement date, again, this is one where we've really achieved it once we start discussing it. So we're going to put March 15th as well. For who will benefit, we're also going to say staff and families. And you can select as many entities as you would like for this. We're going to hit save. Okay. So now we get into the study and act phase, where we check in on how our different strategies are going. So we are going to look at the data first. So we have our baseline data. We ran it in February. We know we're at 68%. And we've asked supervisors to start entering the service plans. So for check-in date, we're going to run it. Walter's going to run it the first of the month in March. How did we do? So we ran the report and we actually found that our percentage dropped. So we found that we're at 60% for service plans entered. So that's how we did. And for next steps, we're going to discuss this at our team meeting in 2 weeks. Get that in there as well. So we're going to discuss it when we meet as a team. And then for our team discussion, we're going to add a new strategy. So this is our second strategy. And once you've entered strategies and you're doing the check-ins, you can select them from the drop down. For the check-in date, we're going to select March 15th, which is our next team meeting. And so what happened? Well, we decided to do a little bit more root cause analysis at our team meeting. And we found that supervisors are having a difficult time entering service plans due to competing priorities. And so for next steps, we're going to set aside 2 hours per week per supervisor to enter service plans. And we're also going to look at individual workloads to delegate tasks to other staff members where we can. And this is to avoid any unintended consequences of setting aside those 2 hours. And we also asked our project sponsor to step in on the monitoring piece. Our project sponsor is Emily. And Emily is going to now be running the report monthly and disseminating the data. So we're going to save that strategy check-in. And we're also going to, at the top, because we now are going to have Emily running the report, we're going to change the monitoring section as well. And all right, so we have our strategies, which we've adapted. And now we're going to check in April to see how those strategies worked. So we're going to check in the first of the month on the service plan analysis report. So what happened? So it'll be April 3rd. So we ran the service plan analysis report, and we found that a month later, we're at 80%. So that's awesome. Our strategies seem to be working. For next steps, so we are going to discuss it at our next team meeting, which will be in 2 weeks, but we'll likely continue implementing the strategies that we have identified. And at any point during your cycle, your plan, do, study, act cycle, if you're not meeting your goals, you can adjust your change strategy. Just a note. So we're gonna save our check-in, and that is essentially what the process will look like until you achieve your goal. I want to show you one other thing, and that is supporting documents. And this is where you can upload your team roster, you can upload brainstorming notes, you can upload your in-between work for the CQI workshops. So we're going to actually go ahead and upload our in-between work from March. So once you click upload new document, you'll be prompted to choose a file. And we're going to upload our in-between work. And so I'm sorry, I know you probably can't see this. I'm just selecting a file from my computer. And this is our CQI project plan. I do recommend uploading documents as a PDF as opposed to a Word document. When you upload as a PDF and you view the file after it's uploaded, it'll pop up as a new tab. But if you upload as a Word document, you'll need to download it. So for the description, you do have to enter a description in order to upload. So we are going to put CQI project plan. And then we have it. Once you scroll down, it'll be uploaded there. And once I click display, you can see that it's uploaded. And then we're going to click submit. And our Pine Valley Service Plan initiation is now under our queue of projects. So unless anyone has questions, I am going to turn it over to Jill and Lisa with Bikini to talk a little bit more about service plans.
So if there's any questions, I can go ahead and get started. Hi, everybody. I'm Jill with the Training and Staff Development team at Bikini. It's really nice to see everyone. Lisa Gladio and I are both here with you today to share an overview of the service plan, which may be a refresher for many of you. And we're going to share some additional resources to support your service plan work as well. So to start, what is the service plan? The service plan is designed to support conversations and supervision between the supervisor and family support specialists to mindfully connect their work with families to the strengths and risks identified in the FROG scale and in subsequent home visits, with a goal to reduce risk factors and promote protective factors. It's intended to be the roadmap that guides FSS's activities to accomplish program goals. So when thinking about the service plan, you may be wondering what the difference is between the service plan and family goals. So family goals come from the parent. They're meaningful to the family and should be small enough to assure a parent's success and sense of accomplishment. Experiencing success with self-identified goals gives parents hope that they can change their circumstances, confidence that they can set a goal and accomplish it, and the pleasure of accomplishment. The service plan includes the programs or staff goals designed to reduce risk and build protective factors. These are addressed through in-the-moment interventions by using the reflective strategies to build on parental competencies and offering information through teachable moments. So the family goals are really those goals that the family decide that they want to work on, where the service plan really is the program goals. And now I'm going to pass it over to Lisa.
Thank you, Jill. Yes, and as Jill said, this is a refresher to many people, but I'm going to do an overview of the initial service plan development and talk about each step in the service plan. And sometimes this is helpful if you're going to make service plans in improving how they get done and making sure they do get done. If you're going to make that your CQI project, just talking through the process sometimes gives you ideas on where you can make tweaks to improve your process. So as I go through this, there may just be something that stands out to you as you're thinking about your own process at your program that could be one of those action steps, one of those strategies for your CQI. If you're thinking about improving your ability to complete service plans. So initially, service plans, we start the development when we review the FROG scale. The FROG helps us to identify the family strengths and their concerns and risks and stressors. And that gives us a starting plan, a starting place to think about what we need to explore more and how we can start that service plan with families. So it's at the program's discretion as to who transfers the key items from the FROG to the service plan. It can be the FRS or the FSS or the supervisor or a combination. It's however it makes sense in your program to have that person initiate it. And that first initial service plan does need to be completed within 2 weeks of the approval of the FROG scale. So that's your time frame for how to get that first service plan into the system. As I said, it could be the FRS, the FSS, the supervisor that starts that process. It's whatever you determine at your program to make sense. And ultimately, it is the supervisor's responsibility to make sure it gets done and to make all of the items from the frog are on the service plan, to make sure it gets reviewed with the FSS initially, even if it's the FSS that completed the frog, the supervisor still wants to have that discussion with them of how that information got translated onto the service plan and what the priorities are. Because that's something the supervisor wants to make sure is done too, is that the items are prioritized, and we'll talk about that more in a second as to what's going to be worked on first. And over time to make sure that the FSS is implementing the strategies on the plan. So we're going to break it down to the 5 key components of the service plan. The first column is the frog scale domains, and those scores are pre-populated on the service plan. When you start a service plan with a family, those scores are going to be pre-populated. I know I've heard people say, boy, it would be nice if the strengths and the risks were pre-populated too, but our computers just aren't that savvy that they can pick those items out of the narrative, but we do get a little bit of a head start with having the scores there. So we're going to pull out the strengths and protective factors for column 2. And that's what we know we're going to have to use to help increase and build those protective factors in the parental competencies. And column 3 is where we have our risk factors and areas of support. Those are the things that we want to be working on with a family and supporting them. So we want to make sure we have those identified for each of the 14 domains of the frog, and they should be reviewed by the FSS and the supervisor initially, but that does not mean necessarily that we have to dive right in when we get to the next column and address them right away. Our hope is that they will all be addressed over time, but the first thing we're going to do is prioritize them. And there's a box where you can check if it's a priority or not. And the things that are high priority are the things that we're going to address first in our early days with the family. And when thinking about how to prioritize those, the rule of thumb is to consider 3 things. And the first thing is if it's a health and safety issue. The second thing is if it's a barrier to parent-child interaction and attachment. And the third thing is if it's a hope and need expressed by the family. So if it's something the family told you that they want or could use some support in, you want to make that a priority too, even if the topic doesn't rise to the level of a health and safety issue, because by acknowledging and listening to what the family's hopes and needs are, you're going to build up that relationship. You're going to help them see the value of our program, and it's going to help you build that foundation with the family so that you can help them with the other things that are on the frog. So that's why we move that up to a priority. Column 4 is the plan development and strategies. That is when supervisors and FSSs are talking about how they're going to go about addressing these issues with the family. And again,
I'm sorry, Lisa, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Are we supposed to be looking at the actual plan as you're talking through it? Or are we still supposed to be looking at the service plan overview slide, which has 3 bullet points?
Yep, that's what it is. It's just an overview. So it's just that PowerPoint slide.
Okay.
All this information in a second, Jill is going to give you some resources, and all of this information we're taking from those resources that'll be available for you. So if you're thinking, oh my gosh, she's talking too fast, or where's all this coming from, you'll have that information. So thank you for clarifying that. So again, you won't be jumping right in and addressing all of those issues at once, because the beginning goal with a family is to build that relationship and be invited back into the home. We don't want to overwhelm families at first and then never get invited back, because then we'll never get to all of those issues. So we're starting small at the beginning, and we're really working on engaging the family and services and building a trusting relationship. Because again, if we build that relationship, so we continue to work with the family, we will get to all those risk factors and the strategies to address them in time. So the things that we're going to be thinking about here on how to address the issues are using our reflective strategies, offering curriculum, linking families to other community resources, using motivational interviewing techniques to get more information and to get the family thinking about change in some areas. So those are some potential activities. Column 5 is plan implementation. This is going to be where you add information on how those strategies are going. Did the FSS implement them? Did they give them a try? Are they completed? Or did you have to adjust them because they didn't work? That is the information you're going to put on in column 5, how it went when you implemented those strategies in column 4. And you may know you don't have to necessarily write out all the details of that. We don't want people having to do duplicate paperwork. You can always either reference a home visit narrative or a supervisor note if there's more details there. Then at the bottom, after you have all of your domains, there's an area for additional sources. That's when you add more information that you learned after the frog. So you may find out information from your screening tools like the ASQ, the Cheers check-in, the depression screens that you want to add there. Or the FSS may have observed something during a home visit that didn't come up in the frog. The parent could disclose more information. This is where you're going to put new information that you're going to work on that isn't in the frog. And again, there's no required time frame to address any particular issue. It's just that you want to be prioritizing those things and working on the strategies to those most important things at any given time.
Lisa, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Some of us are a little more visual.
Mhm.
So I know you're talking through the service plan, but it would be a little easier to follow if we were actually looking at a service plan as you talk about the various pieces of it.
Okay.
I'm just saying from a visual standpoint.
Okay. So actually, I'm done talking about the service plan. So we won't have that up. I appreciate that, Kara, for the future, that comment. But Jill's going to go on to talk about the ongoing use and what the supervisor's role is, and then where the resources are. So.
Okay, excuse me. So the different columns that Lisa was talking about are what you'll see when you're in the service plan form in the MIS. And I would pull that up, but I don't have a dummy site to be able to do that and show you. But that's where you're going to find those different columns. So Lisa talked a lot about the initial development. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the ongoing use of the service plan. So when I first was talking, I shared that it is really a roadmap that is there throughout the course of service that you're going to be adding to. It's a very fluid document. So you're not just taking that frog and creating that initial service plan, you're really adding to it over time as different things present themselves. So the supervisor and the home visitor will continue to plan during the length of a family service involvement and add to the service plan. Some of the activities that will occur over the course of service include checking in during supervision, checking in to see what plans have been implemented, how did that go? What reflective strategies were used? Were there any referrals? Was there curriculum used? Was there anything else maybe that could be tried for that risk factor that you're addressing? Anything that you want to add to the service plan based upon, maybe things that the family expresses, their needs, their hopes, any health and safety concerns, barriers to the parent-child relationship that they may share or that you may even observe at a home visit. And here's where you'll use that additional sources section of the service plan that Lisa mentioned, that it's at the bottom of your form on the MIS screen. Lisa mentioned as well, reviewing other screens that are conducted or tools used to indicate maybe additional areas where families might benefit from support. So maybe you did an ASQ and the child is, in the gray area or maybe, below the cutoff. So you want to add that to the service plan. So it could be an ASQ, a ASQSE, a depression screen, a Cheers check-in. All of those ongoing things that come up would be added under an additional source in that section of the service plan. So again, it really is that roadmap. You're using it ongoing throughout the course of service. It's really guiding the FSS's delivery of service to the family. And then too, I wanted to talk just a little bit about the service plan discussion and supervision. So in regard to supervision, because the service plan is a dynamic document and really should be frequently referenced during supervision, there is a new performance indicator around that. The frequency though really is, it's discussed at the discretion of the supervisor and the FSS, but the frequency should be based on the needs of each family, including the volume of need, the complexity of need, and the family's urgency combined with readiness for change. So it's really important to keep in mind that when you're working with families, especially those that have experienced unresolved early childhood trauma, you and your team will know best which strategies to apply and the frequency to move forward. In regard to that service plan discussion, again, it really is based on the needs of that family. There is a recommendation that the service plan be discussed in supervision at least once a month for families on level 1, 1P or SS, every other month for families on level 2, and quarterly for families on level 3 or 4. And there is a performance indicator, a new one, requiring in-depth discussion at least once a quarter. So you have to have your discussion for that PI at least once a quarter. But again, since this is a roadmap and you're using the service plan ongoing, it really should be an ongoing discussion and supervision. The next thing I want to do is try to share my screen and share some additional resources with you. So Walter, can I still, there we go, thank you. So bear with me because this is not my forte. Okay, hold on a second. For some reason, all right, hold on a second. I can't find my, here it is. Okay. All right, can everybody see that? Perfect. Okay, so this is the transfer of learning website. So on this website, you are gonna see, I gotta move all my boxes around. If you go to support and tools, into support materials, did it take you along? Can you see the next screen?
Yes.
Okay. You're going to have right here on this first screen, supervision note guidelines. That's a resource that will be helpful for the supervisors when you're writing up your documentation of the review of the service plan and supervision. And then if you go to handbooks, you've got the service plan handbook for supervisors, which is here when you click this. This handbook has a wealth of information in it. There's also links in the handbook to role play videos of the service plan and supervision, and to a video tutorial of how to navigate the service plan in the MIS, as well as a new service plan spotlight video, which really is a quick, I think it's like 13-minute video that's meant for all staff. It just really provides an overview of the service plan. So if you go to service plan videos, again, I hope it takes you with me.
Yep.
Here's the role play videos and the service plan spotlight video. So those are on the TOL. Also, the MIS tutorial that is linked in the service plan handbook, you can also find on the Healthy Families New York MIS. It's under help and docs, and then MIS training guides and webinars. So you can find it there as well. So in addition to those resources, you also have the best practice standards. You have the Healthy Families New York policy and your local procedure. And then also there is, this is tentative right now, there's more information coming out, but on July 10th, from 10 to 11, there's going to be service plan office hours where folks can come and just ask any questions that they may have in regard to the service plan. So there'll be more information coming out about that. So I'm going to stop my share. And I just want to make sure that I talked about every resource that I had on my list. And I did. So also the handbook that I showed you in the TOL, you can also find that on the Healthy Families New York website under worker roles under the supervisor tab. So some of these resources you can find in two places, but if you're looking around and you can't find them, please don't hesitate to reach out and we can steer you in the right direction. And now I think I'm going to pass it back to Lisa.
Yeah, so we just wanted to let you know where those resources are. I saw some people put in the chat box how it would be nice to have somebody walk them right through the inputting the form. And as Jill said, Corey did do that, and it's under with all the other MIS like form type webinars on the MIS page, but there is a link to it in that service plan handbook. I really recommend it because, you know, we have questions sometimes too. And I watched that presentation that Corey did the other day, and I had 2 or 3 questions, and I watched that and it answered them. So we just want to really encourage people to look at those resources because we've refreshed them, knowing that everybody's thinking about service plans now. Between that handbook and that spotlight PowerPoint and the videos that were created to give people an idea of what a conversation looks like. We really believe that if you look at those resources and spend a minute with them, a lot of your questions are going to be answered.
As I'm in the midst of applying for residency right now, wish me luck.
Well, good luck. So If you do have questions, though, if you look at those resources, please, you can reach out to your Picani QA specialist, because we'll be happy to talk you through any other specific questions you have if those resources don't help you out.
I also just included in the chat the link to the TOL website and the link to the MIS video that I mentioned, and Lisa just mentioned that Corey put together. So you have those right there as well.
Thank you, Lisa and Jill, for that. So just to wrap everything up here, we are going to briefly discuss what you're going to work on the MIS in May. In between month work in May. We'll be sending out what's called a CQI PDSA form. This is going to be for you to fill out and kind of keep track of this whole section that you've started working on and learned about today. So the sections that we want you to fill out at this point is tracking success, root cause analysis conducted, the SMARTY aim statement section, project description, and the number 1 plan. I know that sounds like a lot. They're really short sections. That'll be really easy for you to like fill out there for you. The thing I want to give a disclaimer with that is the rest of it is the future of the PDSA cycle. You can fill out those later sections if you'd like. You can start working on implementing your change plans and your future CQI projects at that point. You do not need to complete them at this time, though. That's not where we're supposed to be at this point. If you do not want to be there, if you're not comfortable with that, you can get the full process in June before you kind of fully flush everything out. So I just wanted to mention that as well. The other thing we want you to work on in between then as well is to complete and fill out the basic information or the plan section in the MIS CQI plan form as well. So you have that at your disposal. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me or Ava as you're filling these out and working on these. I love working with you all when you have these questions on this and working with you on that process.
I have a question.
Oh.
Do you mind going back to the previous slide?
Yeah, of course.
The sections on the that you mentioned, that first bullet point, tracking success and everything, that's going to be documented on like a form that
It'll be a Word document like we did last time. And that's a great question, Emily. Also, shamelessly steal from yourselves. Whatever is relevant in that form that you can copy and paste into the MIS, please do so. Also, please put it in the MIS as a PDF itself. So that way, again, you're getting credit for the work that you're doing. And again, shamelessly steal from yourself. Don't do double work if you don't have to in this case.
Okay, so yeah, that was my question. So, but I mean, it's recommended to still have that form completely filled out, even if it's getting translated into like the MIS form.
Yeah. So pardon.
So the sections in the document that's going to be sent out, is that just for kind of like
that's for your own purposes,
documentation purposes, and then the information gets translated into the CQI form, or is that going to be a required form? In addition,
so the MIS CQI plan form is the main thing that's really actually going to be looked at. This PDSA form that I'm sending you, that'll be a Word document that you fill out. That's for your own recording and track. Yeah, it's going to be like those worksheets that we've had. That's going to be what's helping you keep track of this whole steps.
Thank you.
Esther.
Yeah, so following up on Emily's question, what would you prefer if we want to seek your help and feedback as we work on this? What would you prefer us asking you for help with? Telling you go into my site at an MIS, or what do you want us to send you this form?
You could do either, honestly. So if we do that, we could work together, set up a meeting to look at your MIS, or if you want to send this form to me and I could solicit feedback that way, or if we want to set up a meeting to work over that form together, I'd be happy either way with that. Absolutely. The other thing I want to point is there are other materials. I do have some hyperlinks to the ones such as Lisa and Jill have already talked about here. So we do have service plan training materials, the handbook. There's a link to the CQI guide that Ava mentioned earlier. And we're also going to be sending out CQI toolkit handouts. We already got 2 of them. We'll send you out another one that pertains to this topic, this workshop's topic, and we'll try and get those on the website, Healthy Families New York website as well for you. So you have that available to you. But with that all being said, I really just want to thank you all so much for engaging in this process and working with us today. I would love to answer whatever questions that you have at this time. Otherwise, I'd like to be mindful of people's times. We're coming right up to noon. So if you want to leave, you're more than welcome to. But otherwise, we'll hopefully see you in workshop number 3 on June 15th. And thank you all again for just working so hard at all this.
Thank you, guys. We'll see you next time.
All righty, I think we're all set.
I just have a question, Walter.
Yeah.
Is that PowerPoint the last one that you sent Jill and I? I just want to make sure our links are right because we've been updating our service plan